The sermon for today is going to follow in the line of both of our speakers. This idea of, your story, which was the Ladies' Day theme, and then Patrick's of being Jesus. These are conversations and Patrick's, particularly because I got to listen to Patrick, is going to weigh heavy into what we speak on today in Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through the beginning of chapter 3. So if you have a Bible, go and begin opening Mark chapter 2, verse 23 is where we'll start in just a moment. But before I read the text, I want to share with you something and this is like a Josh Watkins rule. When I'm driving down the road, I have a general rule. If I see you on the side of the road and your hood is up, I don't stop. And you're going to say, well, Josh, that's awful foolish. Why would you not? Well, it's because if the hood is up, I can't help you. I could offer you my phone. I could stand there and look at it. And I could say, yeah, something's wrong. And that's about as far as I go. Okay. I mean, I could change the oil, but if you're on the side of the road, you don't need an oil change. Like that's kind of where the Josh Watkins mechanical, the motor stops. Is I'm like, yeah, that sure looks pretty. I don't know what I'm doing. So if your hood's up, I'm going to pass you by. If I drive by and you're a guy and you have a flat tire, I'm probably not going to think about it. You should be able to change your tire, men. Okay. So that's the Josh Watkins rule. I kind of live by it. It's like if I'm driving by, you got a flat tire and you're a guy, tough luck. Figure it out. You can watch a YouTube video and figure it out real quick. If I drive by and I see an older lady or if I see a lady, period, or someone who does completely look dumbfounded, and it's a flat tire, and it's noticeably a flat tire, I'm all over it. That's the thing. I mean, I'm great. I can change a tire in like 10 minutes. I'm really good at it. I'm like, yes, we can change a tire, and I can feel like I've done good. And so that's generally that's a rule of Josh Watkins. If I see now, then I then learn after moving to a city that you're not supposed to stop and help people because they might try and rob you or something. I feel like I've all of a sudden been afraid to help people because I hear these horror stories. But those are some general rules that Josh Watkins follows when it comes to motor vehicles and helping others. And one particular Sunday morning, my rule got tested. I was driving at the time. This was before Ash and I were married. I lived in Capitan. I was driving to Roswell to preach for the day. And that's about an hour and a half drive. I make the drive down. And as I'm getting into Roswell, I'm in a suit because I'm like, that's what you're supposed to wear when you're going to like interview at a place. So I'm like, I'm in a suit and I've got a tie on, which if you know, I hate ties. Like this is and Roswell's hot. It's like 90 something degrees. And there's a lady on the side of the road with a noticeably flat tire. I'm on my way to church. I'm on my way to an interview. I'm on my way thinking like, I don't have time to stop and change this tire. But what's the rule that Josh Watkins follows? Now, look, you could praise me and say, oh, Josh did a good thing in this, but you don't have to praise me. It's a rule. I followed my own rule. Okay. So I'm just being obedient to the things that I've set for myself to follow. So it's like I stop, I take my coat off. I always wear an undershirt. So I take my outer shirt off and I'm like, okay, let's get this tire changed. I'm now hot and sweaty. I've got grease on my hands. I get back in the car. I drive to the church building. I go to the bathroom and clean up and wash up. And I think about that moment because of this. How easy would it have been to drive on? Would anyone have known any wiser? Now that woman, she would have sat there longer, but there's probably someone coming along at some point who's going to help her. Would anyone have been the wiser? And I realize that in moments like that, and I believe that each one of you have a moment where you look at it and you're like, I didn't have to do good, but I did. And maybe even doing good was an inconvenience for me, but I chose to do good. And that's where I come to this phrase or this idea that genuine goodness is more godly than oblivious obedience. Now, those are some big words. And so as I say those big words, oblivious means you're just completely aloof. You don't even know. You're kind of, your head's in the sky. I put here, not aware. You just don't know. You're oblivious. And when I think of obedience, oftentimes we can become oblivious to our obedience. We just do it because that's the way it's always been done. Or we do it because we feel that that's what we should do. We have the expectation that that's what we're going to do. And this idea of genuine goodness is that it's from the heart. It's real. So when I look at this statement, and this is the statement that I'm going to use for the next two stories in our text for today, is this idea that genuine goodness is more godly than oblivious obedience. This idea that I'm going to genuinely be good, that I'm going to seek to do good things because my heart's set on it. Because that's who I am, that's the essence, that's who I am on the inside. That I am just to mindlessly obey what I've been taught. Let's begin with our text. Mark chapter 2, verse 23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are you doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" Jesus, answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priest to eat. And he also gave to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Chapter 3. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." And Jesus asked them, the crowd, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. The first set of the text, the very beginning, before chapter 3, Jesus shares this story because the question's asked, why are your disciples doing what's unlawful? This idea of lawful was that their oblivious obedience would say that you cannot pick grain on this day. It's a holy day, and that's considered work, so you should not do that. And so this idea that we would blindly or mindlessly follow the rules says you don't do that. And Jesus brings up this point. He says, well, let's go back to an Old Testament text real quick. And this is in 1 Samuel chapter 21, where David goes and he eats the holy bread from the presence. He takes something that should not have been given to him. Leviticus chapter 24 and verse 9 says it, talking about the bread, belongs to Aaron and his sons who are to eat it in the sanctuary area because it is the most holy part of their perpetual share of the food offering presented to the Lord. So we notice in this verse that the only people who are allowed to have that are the priests. It is reserved for them. Like it is, and then they even use the word most holy. But who got to eat it? David. Does he fit the bill? No. And oh, by the way, he gave it to his companions, the men who were traveling with him. And the priest in 1 Samuel asked just a series of questions. Basically, are you in some way holy? Are you in some way sacred? Have you set yourself apart? Have you not had relations with women? He says, and David says, we are good in those areas. And the high priest says, okay, here you go. Obedience to the law would not have allowed David to have the bread. Obedience to the law would have said, I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you. You're going to have to go on. But there was something good that happened, that David got food. his men got food. Aside from that, there's another little part in this story that David lies to the priest, but that's, these are all fun stories, aren't they? We then move to the second set of the text, the second story. And Jesus in this is asking the question, do you do good or do you do evil? Is it right to give life or to kill on the Sabbath? Yet again, the law would establish that you can't do work on this day. You can't do this stuff. So the obedience would say, stop. But goodness, godliness would say to heal. Jesus is going to further comment in other texts. So in Luke chapter 14 and verse 5, Jesus is going to say, if one of you had a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not pull them out? If my child fell into a well, I'm going to do whatever it takes to pull them out. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, I can't work today, so you're just going to have to wait till tomorrow. No, Jesus is understanding. He's attempting to get them to understand that oblivious obedience, mindless obedience, is not the calling of God. Mindless obedience is not what God desired for us. Genuine goodness is what we are called to do. And Jesus is trying to tell the crowd that. He's trying to get that message into them. Another example that Jesus would share is in Matthew 12 and verse 5. Haven't you read the law that the priests are performing duties on the Sabbath day, but yet they're declared innocent of the laws of the Sabbath? The priest had to work on Saturdays. They had to do their job. And that was the day that they probably worked the hardest. And so he's saying, look, the priests even do their work on the Sabbath day, but yet they're considered innocent. Why? Because yet again, mindless obedience is not what God's after. What he's truly after is someone who's seeking genuine goodness and wanting to make the world a genuinely good place. Now, some of you I know are cringing at what I'm saying. You're sitting in your seat right now because feeling like you just ate a cheap burrito from a gas station. And you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I don't know how I feel right now. And I get it. I get it. You know why? Because I like rules. I seem to thrive on. If you tell me that this is the way it needs to be done, I'm the guy that's like, okay, makes sense. Let's do it that way. If I find something that might work better, I might voice my opinion. But I'm the guy that pulls out the manual and says, how do I put this together and make sure that I do it right from the beginning? Because I don't want to get to the very end and find I have an extra screw or something left over. I understand that rules are this place of safety. They help us to feel comfortable. As long as I can define my life by rules, I feel good. If I know that I should do whatever it is, and I'm told every time that I see a woman on the side of the road who obviously can't change a tire. Now, look, I have seen some of you women change tires. Not you women, but I have seen women change tires. I don't pull over for those women. They can handle themselves. But it's like if I have a rule that tells me that this is what I do, it's safe because I already know the expectation. I already know what I should do. And there's no genuine goodness. It's just obedience. But is that the call of God? And that's what Jesus is asking in both of these accounts. Is he's talking about the Sabbath, a day that would be considered holy and sacred, but he's saying, you can so follow the laws, you can so follow the rules that you fail to actually be good. Let me give you some examples of how things have changed, how our laws have changed. Some of you will remember when a man had to wear a tie to serve. I'm thankful that that rule has changed, by the way. Y'all remember those days when a man had to wear a tie to serve? Some of you are saying, well, man, I wish you still did. I don't know if this shirt would fit a tie. My neck's gotten a little bit bigger since then. I'm thankful that rules changed. There was a time when we would look down on people if they didn't come in wearing a suit. Maybe they didn't have the same love for God that I have because they weren't as obedient as I am. Now, one that we won't remember very well, but it's one that was obviously, that's honestly a church struggle from the years of the past, is women wearing veils to pray. And in some churches, that is still a big issue. I don't know if any of you women have ever worn a veil to pray, but that is a textual concept. That's something that's in our Bibles. And yet we have grown accustomed to the change because the rules, we've sat and said, well, is the rule meant to be followed obediently, mindlessly, obliviously? Or is it about genuine goodness? Is it about talking to God and bringing our cares and concerns to Him? You see, I understand that sometimes this conversation feels a little weird when we've grown up being taught rules, because rules equal safety. But rules don't get us close to people. Rules don't get us to love. You see, because there's the polar opposite of this concept where we would have someone who would say, Josh, I've gotten so busy doing good stuff that I don't even have time for church. I'm just so busy doing good. I'm going down. I'm serving on the soup kitchens. I'm passing out clothes. I'm helping pay utility bills. I'm doing so much good that I ain't got time for church. I ain't got time to be part of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. I don't have time for all that because I'm doing so much good. And so the opposite of this whole conversation is that we can sit in our legalistic, pharisaical, mindless, obedient position, or we can, the other extreme is that we can be willy-nilly, all doing good with no question or no thought to obedience. And you know what? Isn't that a problem too? I mean, if I go on, I say, man, I'm going to do, I know a lot of people who are doing a lot of good things, but God doesn't have to be a part of their heart for that to be good, does it? A lot of people can do good stuff and never have God as part of their message. This idea that genuine goodness versus oblivious obedience is important because we can easily obey without ever being good. We can obey the rules and never have a heart that's been changed. We can do the right stuff and not have the inner workings of a child of God. I can tell you, if I see a car on the side of the road, I have a rule that says this is what I do. It doesn't mean I necessarily like it. It's not that I'm genuinely concerned about the betterment of society and that I want to make the world a better place. It's oftentimes very selfish. If I saw Ashley on the side of the road, I'd want someone to stop and help her. So I make it selfish. You see, I fear, can become very quick to do things out of pure obedience and miss doing things out of genuine goodness. Jesus, I believe in this passage, Mark chapter 2 and 3, is calling us to do good. As Patrick said, and as Patrick said this morning, do what you can. Oh, now do what you can with what you have, with the person right in front of you. And I look at these two stories of Jesus, and I look at the stories of your life, I look at the stories of my life, and I know that there is goodness that needs to be done by each one of us. And each one of us, our goodness is different. Our opportunities are different. I'll give you an example that I do, that I've started doing. I'm yet again, don't pat me on the back, and you might see me not do it next time, and you'll say, Josh says he does that. Well, I'm still working on it. But when I see a beggar on the side of the road, I roll my window down and I say, I don't have money to give you, but I'm a praying man. Can I pray for you? And I found that most of them are very open to that. That's a goodness that I'm working on. I'm working on developing it. You may have a different goodness. I looked at Renee a moment ago and I thought there's a goodness that happens with children downstairs. There's a goodness that happens when you ladies get together to sew blankets for the hospital, or for babies, or wherever the blankets are sewn for. There's a genuine goodness when you take someone's computer and you help them out. There's a genuine goodness when you're working with people wherever you're working and you help them be better and you're looking out for them. We all have different opportunities, but I think the place to start is with the person right in front of you. Maybe we could be a genuine goodness here at our own church. There's a lot of good going on here. There's a lot of good people here. But maybe we can be a genuine goodness here. Right now, I'm going to invite Greg up. I think he has our application prayer this morning. I'm going to invite Greg up to lead us in that prayer. As he prays, it's the prayer for all of us. But after the prayer, if there is some way that we can walk with you through this journey of life, we can help you, pray with you, come forward and find me. Greg?
Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for allowing us to be here today to participate in worship. Lord, help us to hear the words of practicing genuine goodness and not just blind, rote obedience that sometimes becomes heartless and without feeling. Lord, we have so many opportunities to show goodness through our giving here collectively to help our programs, through sharing with others as we meet them daily. And help us to hear the phrase, do what you can with what you have, with the person in front of you. Lord, be with us as we leave this place today. In Jesus' name, amen.